Senator Patterson, will come to you, and then Senator Polley.
Thank you. I also want to ask some questions about the vandalism incidents on war memorials in Canberra this week. What has been the AFP's role so far in investigating these incidents of vandalism?
Yeah, I think that's fallen to ACT policing,
Yep.
but noting that we have a very accomplished counter-terrorism specialist over there, the Deputy Chief Police Officer of the ACT, Scott Lee, and probably to help yourself, Senator, we are going with our eyes open on that one, and whether or not there's any linkages between that and what occurred today. We will be looking at every avenue, and also across the country. Is it a organised group? We will leave no stone unturned on this, because it's an absolute disgrace. I think most of us feel, well, certainly me, I felt sick when I saw those images and the defecation of those monuments, and I think it's an absolute disgrace and un-Australian.
Yep. So obviously the target of this most recent attack was the Vietnam and Korean war memorials, but it's not the first incident. There was also an attack on the main war memorial as well. In either case, have any suspects been identified?
Not to my knowledge, but we are, as I said, actively pursuing lines of inquiry.
In the case of the Australian War Memorial, there's been security footage published of a offender or alleged offender. Is there security footage of the most recent vandalism?
I would have to ask the Chief Police Officer of the ACT, but I don't believe so. But as you know, there's lots of cameras around, so no doubt they'll be looking at all in the vicinity, which, as you know, takes a bit of work.
Yeah, I would have thought it would be hard to drive to a location like that without your vehicle being identified. There are so many cameras in that vicinity.
Yes.
What are the potential offences that the individuals responsible could be charged with?
Normally, an offence like that would be criminal damage, and there may be some specific offences, but I would have to take that on notice. Would that be right, Deputy?
Yeah, I mean, primarily ACT policing would be focusing on state legislation, but they're, depending on what other information we might uncover in relation to links to any other acts of vandalism, whether, there are further offences that might relate.
And what typically is a sentence for an offence like that, as an example?
Criminal damage, it's a hard one. I mean, it's a penalty of imprisonment.
Yeah.
Not many people in my own personal experience would go to prison for that, but it just depends on also their history and their offending. It just depends on a whole range of things. So, and to my knowledge, there's no mandatory minimum or anything like that with that particular offence.
Do you think that offenders are deterred by the possibility of criminal charges if they don't think the prospect of going to prison is very likely?
I think that's a hard one to answer. It's probably because people have a mixed view that what they're doing is for democracy and freedom and a whole range of incorrect views. So I think they wouldn't even care, a lot of those people, about what the penalties are.
Has the government sought your advice on whether any new legislation could be introduced to combat this at the Commonwealth level?
Oh, that's something we would talk with the Secretary and Attorney General's Department about if we were concerned about legislation gaps, but I'm not aware of any currently.
Okay. Has the government discussed with you any additional resources necessary to police these monuments in terms of patrols, guarding, extra surveillance, any forms of additional measures?
I mean, we do that as a matter of course. We have our own, every time, you may or may not be aware, and maybe the Deputy again wants to talk through what we do when Parliament sits. We run a major operations and we have a surge in resources. Did you want to talk about those?
Yeah, and I think it's important. We do have a protection operating model which is very much intel-driven, and it does look at threat, risk and vulnerability, and it does really guide us in terms of where we need to have our resources and when. Of course, as we've stated, this primarily is a matter that sits within the jurisdiction of ACT Policing, but we have the benefit here in Canberra of obviously working very closely with ACT Policing, and I can say that our Specialist Protective Command and ACT Policing have been working very closely, not just in relation to those incidents recently, but a number of other incidents in Canberra over sort of recent months.
What are the other incidents you're referring to?
There's been a couple of other acts of property damage. I couldn't go into the details, I'm sorry, because again it sits within ACT Policing, so I don't have the depth of detail.
But similarly politically motivated with,
Correct.
slogans about Palestine and that kind of thing?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.